The year is 1683. Across the Hungarian plains, the earth itself trembles beneath the weight of conquest. 150,000 Ottoman warriors march west, an army so colossal it takes 3 hours for its columns to pass a single point. The crescent banners of Sultan Mehmed IV swallow the summer sky. Commanding them is Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha, architect of the most feared war machine on earth. He has carved a path of blood and fire through the Balkans, leaving shattered cities and burned fields in his wake. Now he fixes his gaze on Vienna, the golden apple of Europe. If Vienna falls, the gates to Germany swing open. If Vienna falls, Italy kneels. If Vienna falls, the fractured Christian kingdoms of Europe collapse like dominoes. The Sultan has promised Mustafa this golden apple, the ancient symbol of absolute dominion. If he delivers this final prize, the continent knows what comes next. Yet Europe does nothing. The Holy Roman Empire stands weak, paralyzed by politics and pride. Its emperor has already fled Vienna in shame. France lurks in the shadows, refusing to aid its Austrian rival. The Italian states quarrel among themselves. Protestant and Catholic still bleed from wounds of wars that nearly destroyed them both. The great powers see only their own ambitions. None see the abyss yawning beneath their feet. Only one man believes the darkness can be stopped. King Jan III. Sobieski of Poland, he is 60 years old, a warrior forged in youth, a veteran of 30 brutal campaigns against Turk and Tatar alike, a man whose faith runs so deep it unnerves those who do not share it. Where others see despair, he sees sacred duty. Where others see impossible mathematics, he sees the hand of Providence calling him to stand. His kingdom is bankrupt. His treasury lies empty. His army numbers only a few thousand. But his faith burns brighter than the sun rising over the Carpathian mountains. He sends word to Vienna, "Hold, I am coming." He does not ask permission from allies. He does not wait for promises of payment or reinforcement. He simply gathers every man who can ride and begins the longest forced march in Polish history. Because Jan Sobieski understands what lesser men forget, that some moments transcend calculation, that when civilization teeters at the precipice, good men do not count the cost. They pay it. By mid-July, the Ottoman host encircles Vienna, 150,000 against 15,000 defenders. The walls are ancient, built before gunpowder learned to shatter stone. The garrison is pitifully small, commanded by Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg, a man of iron will who knows the truth. They cannot win, yet he refuses to surrender. The siege engines begin their work. Day and night the cannons thunder. Spring arrives in 1683, but it brings no renewal. Across the vast expanse of the Ottoman Empire, from Constantinople to the Balkans, the drums of war begin to beat. Grand Vizier Kara Mustafa Pasha stands before Sultan Mehmed IV with a vision that will reshape the world. He speaks of Vienna, the jewel that has eluded Ottoman conquest for generations. Take Vienna, he promises, and all of Europe becomes a garden for the Sultan to harvest. The Sultan gives his blessing. The golden apple will be plucked. What follows is a mobilization unlike anything Europe has witnessed in living memory. From every corner of the empire, warriors converge. Janissaries march from their barracks in Constantinople, elite infantry who have never known defeat. Sipahi cavalry ride in from Anatolia, their lances glinting in the spring sun. Tatar horsemen descend from the steppes like locusts. Artillery trains roll westward, bronze cannons that can reduce castle walls to dust. The assembly point becomes a city unto itself. Tents spread across the landscape for miles. Supply wagons form columns that stretch beyond the horizon. When the Ottoman host finally begins its march west in early summer, it takes 3 full hours for the army to pass a single checkpoint. 150,000 men moving as one organism, breathing conquest, bleeding ambition. Kara Mustafa rides at the vanguard, already tasting victory. He has fought in a dozen campaigns. He knows how empires crumble. Vienna is the key that unlocks every door. Once it falls, the road to Germany lies defenseless. Italy will beg for mercy. The fractured Christian kingdoms will topple like rotten timber. Yet as this juggernaut rolls toward Vienna, Europe watches with the paralysis of the damned. The Holy Roman Empire, that ancient titan, has become a hollow shell. Emperor Leopold I commands on paper, but his authority fractures across 100 competing princes and free cities. Protestant and Catholic territories still nurse grievances from the 30 Years' War that nearly destroyed the continent a generation ago. Old wounds refuse to heal. Unity remains a fantasy. France, the most powerful kingdom in Christendom, does nothing. King Louis XIV watches from Versailles with calculating eyes. Let Austria bleed, he reasons. A weakened Habsburg Empire serves French interests better than a rescued one. Treachery masquerading as statecraft. The Italian states argue among themselves as they have for centuries. Venice worries about trade routes. The Papal States issue prayers but no armies. Milan and Naples bicker over ancient slights while the Ottoman shadow lengthens across the continent. Even within the Austrian domains, division reigns. Protestant princes hesitate to save Catholic Vienna. Political rivals of the Habsburgs see opportunity in catastrophe. The great powers of Europe see only their own narrow interests, blind to the abyss opening beneath them all. By July, the Ottoman host crosses into Hungary unopposed. Villages burn, cities surrender without resistance. The crescent banners advance like a tide that cannot be turned. Vienna stands alone. 15,000 defenders against the greatest army the Sultan has ever assembled. The walls are old, the garrison is small, help is not coming. Kara Mustafa knows this. He can taste the golden apple already. Europe's heart will stop beating, and a new age will dawn, the age of the crescent over the cross. The stage is set for apocalypse. While Europe's great powers calculate and hesitate, one man stands in his war room in Krakow and sees with perfect clarity what must be done. King Jan III Sobieski is 60 years old. His beard has gone grey. His body carries the scars of 3 decades of warfare. He has fought Turks, Tatars, Cossacks, and Swedes. 30 battles have taught him that war is hell, but some hells must be entered willingly. He has stared into the eyes of charging cavalry and lived. He has seen empires rise and crumble. He knows what is coming if Vienna falls. In an age of cynical politics and calculated self-interest, Sobieski remains something Europe thought extinct, a man of absolute faith. He prays each morning before dawn. He believes with every fibre of his being that God has placed him on the throne of Poland for this exact moment, not to be comfortable, not to preserve his kingdom's treasure, but to stand when standing seems like madness. The reports from Vienna grow more desperate by the day. The Ottoman army has begun its siege. The city is dying. Messengers arrive begging for help, and Sobieski reads each plea with a heavy heart because he knows what answering will cost. His kingdom is bankrupt. 20 years of constant warfare have drained Poland's treasury to its last coin. His army is exhausted, worn down by campaigns against the Ottomans, against raiders from the steppes, against enemies on every border. His nobles grumble about taxes. His people are tired. His resources are depleted. His advisers gather in the council chamber and present the brutal mathematics. Poland cannot afford this war. The Ottoman army outnumbers anything they can field by ratios that make victory impossible. Vienna is Austria's problem, not Poland's. The Habsburgs have never been friends to Poland. Why should Polish blood be spent saving Austrian walls? Let Vienna fall, they counsel. Husband resources, protect Poland's borders, survive. Sobieski listens to every argument. He understands the logic. He knows his advisers are not wrong about the numbers. Poland marching to Vienna's rescue is financial suicide dressed up as military strategy. Then he looks at the map. Vienna falls, and the Ottomans will not stop. They will roll north. They will come for Poland next. And when they do, Poland will stand alone, just as Vienna stands alone now. The fractures in Europe will become chasms. The continent will be devoured piece by piece because no one was willing to pay the price when it mattered. Some moments transcend calculation. Some decisions cannot be made with ledgers and troop counts. When civilization stands at the precipice, when darkness gathers at the gate, good men do not ask whether they can afford to fight. They simply pay whatever the cost demands. Sobieski rises from his chair. His decision is made. He dictates a message to be sent to Vienna immediately. 3 words that will echo through history. Hold, I am coming. He does not ask the nobles for permission. He does not wait for promises of payment from Austria. He does not convene another council to debate the impossible. He simply begins issuing orders. Gather every man who can ride, strip the garrison from every fortress, call in favors, empty the armories, prepare for the longest forced march Poland has ever attempted, because Vienna must not fall, and Jan Sobieski will not let it. By mid-July, the Ottoman host completes its encirclement of Vienna. 150,000 warriors form a noose around the city. From the walls, the defenders can see the crescent banners stretching to the horizon in every direction. There is no escape. There is no relief. There are only 15,000 men standing between civilization and conquest. Count Ernst Rüdiger von Starhemberg walks the ramparts each dawn and counts his ghosts. That is what his men are becoming. Hollow-eyed spectres in tattered uniforms, half-starved soldiers holding positions they know they cannot keep. But Starhemberg is a man of iron will forged in the fires of a dozen campaigns. He knows they cannot win. He also knows they cannot surrender, so they will fight until there is nothing left to fight with. The siege engines begin their terrible work. Day and night the Ottoman cannons roar, bronze monsters that hurl stone and iron against walls built before gunpowder learned to kill. Each impact sends shockwaves through the city. Each explosion brings down another section of ancient masonry. The defenders rush to repair breaches faster than the Ottomans can create them, but it is a losing race against time and mathematics. Ottoman miners dig beneath the walls like moles burrowing toward hell. They excavate tunnels, pack them with gunpowder, and collapse entire bastions in eruptions of fire and screaming stone. The defenders dig countermines, fighting underground battles in darkness lit only by torches and muzzle flashes. Inside Vienna, a different horror unfolds. The city is dying by inches. Food runs low, then lower, then vanishes entirely. People boil leather belts to make soup that tastes like despair. Rats become delicacies, hunted through the streets like precious game. The markets stand empty. The bakeries have nothing to sell. Hunger becomes the enemy that kills more surely than Ottoman steel. Water runs even scarcer. The wells cannot supply a city under siege. Disease spreads through the cramped streets like wildfire through dry timber. Dysentery claims dozens daily. Fever burns through entire neighborhoods. Wounds that should heal fester and rot. Children die first. Their small bodies cannot endure starvation. Mothers hold hollow infants and weep prayers that God no longer seems to hear. Then the elderly go, their weakened frames surrendering to hunger and sickness. Each morning brings new corpses. Each night brings new terrors. The streets that once rang with music and laughter fall silent except for distant cannon fire and the cries of the wounded. People shuffle through the city like the walking dead, eyes vacant, hope extinguished. Time stops being measured in days or hours. It becomes measured in heartbeats and prayers. Each breath might be the last. Each moment of survival feels like a miracle borrowed from a heaven that has turned its face away. Outside the walls, Kara Mustafa reclines in his silk pavilion, dining on roasted lamb and honey-drizzled pastries. While Vienna starves, he has built a city of luxury among his tents. Musicians play in the evenings. Merchants set up bazaars selling plundered treasures. Foreign ambassadors visit to watch the siege as though it were theatre. Mustafa is patient. Why waste men in costly assaults when hunger will do the work for free? He has already divided Vienna's wealth in his imagination. He knows which palaces he will gift to the Sultan, which churches will become mosques, which treasures will fill his personal coffers. He does not look north toward the distant mountains. He does not imagine anyone would be foolish enough to challenge him. Victory is inevitable. It is only a matter of time. Inside Vienna, time is running out. The march south becomes a prayer written in iron and willpower. King Jan Sobieski leads his army across 500 miles of wilderness that would break lesser men. This is not a march. It is an act of defiance against geography itself, against time, against the logic that says no army can move this fast and arrive ready to fight. They traverse the Carpathian Mountains in the dead of summer when storms turn mountain passes into rivers of mud. Rain lashes them for days without ceasing. Lightning splits the sky above peaks that seem to scrape heaven itself. The trails become treacherous, horses stumbling on rocks slick with water, men clinging to saddles as the path drops away into darkness on either side. They push 40 miles one day, 50 the next, when desperation drives them harder. There is no rest. There is no leisure. Every hour that passes is another hour. Vienna bleeds. Every moment wasted is another child dying in the streets, another section of wall crumbling, another step closer to catastrophe. They cross rivers swollen with mountain runoff, the water running fast and cold enough to kill. Men and horses plunge into currents that try to sweep them away. Some don't make it across. Their bodies are pulled under, lost to the fury of nature. But the march does not stop. It cannot stop. They ride through forests so dense the sun vanishes for days at a time, ancient woods where shadows pool like black water, and the only light comes from what filters through the canopy in thin, ghostly shafts. The world becomes twilight and rain, and the endless rhythm of hooves on earth. They sleep in their saddles when they sleep at all. They eat hard bread and dried meat without dismounting because every minute matters. Some men fall asleep while riding and wake miles later still moving forward because their horses know the way. This is beyond human endurance. This is faith made manifest in flesh and determination. At the vanguard ride the Winged Hussars, Poland's elite cavalry, the finest heavy cavalry Europe has ever produced. These are not common soldiers. These are lords of war, nobility armoured in plate and mail that costs more than most peasants will earn in 10 lifetimes, each piece custom fitted, polished to mirror brightness, strong enough to turn aside sword and bullet alike. But it is what rises from their backs that makes them legend. Wings, wooden frames mounted behind their shoulders, filled with eagle feathers that span 6 feet or more, not decoration, not vanity. These wings are weapons as surely as their lances and sabres. When the hussars charge, the wings catch the wind and create a sound that no enemy ever forgets, a rising, whistling roar like 1,000 eagles diving at once. It is the sound of approaching doom. Psychological warfare perfected over generations, designed to break enemy morale before the first lance strikes home. Each hussar owns lands, commands servants, holds titles that grant comfort and safety. Any one of them could have stayed home, could have let Vienna fall while they remained secure in their estates. But they ride anyway, toward a battle they might not survive, because honor demands it, because their king called, because some things matter more than survival. They are the last true knights of Europe, and they ride to save a world that no longer believes in such things. At Tulln, north of Vienna, an impossible alliance takes shape. The Polish army arrives exhausted from their forced march, and waiting for them are the imperial forces under Duke Charles of Lorraine. These men should be enemies. History has given them every reason to hate each other. Poles and Austrians have fought border wars for generations. They have spilled each other's blood over territories and titles and ancient grievances that no one can quite remember, but everyone refuses to forget. The Habsburgs have schemed against Polish interests. Polish kings have returned the favour. Mistrust runs deeper than any river. But when Sobieski dismounts and clasps hands with Duke Charles, something shifts. Two commanders look into each other's eyes and see the same truth reflected back. Vienna is dying, and if it falls, they will all die in turn. The Ottomans will not stop at Austrian borders. They will roll north into Poland. They will sweep west into Germany. The entire continent will burn. Old hatreds become luxuries they can no longer afford. Catholic and Protestant soldiers who should view each other as heretics stand shoulder to shoulder and recognize each other as brothers. The 30 Years' War tore Europe apart barely a generation ago. The wounds still bleed. Protestant princes still remember Catholic armies burning their cities. Catholic lords still curse Protestant rebellions. The theological divide has cost hundreds of thousands of lives, yet here, in the shadow of Vienna's approaching doom, those divisions dissolve like morning frost under the sun. Chaplains from both faiths lead prayers side by side. Protestant officers break bread with Catholic knights, because the Ottomans do not care about their doctrinal differences. The crescent banners will fall on Protestant and Catholic alike. Survival demands unity that politics could never create. The southern German princes contribute their contingents. Bavaria sends cavalry. Saxony sends infantry. Franconia sends what it can spare. Each force is small, but together they become something greater than the sum of their parts. The final count staggers the mind. 27,000 relief forces against 80,000 entrenched Ottoman defenders. The mathematics are suicide dressed up as military planning. No competent commander would accept these odds. No rational strategy would recommend attack. Every calculation screams retreat, regroup, wait for better numbers. But there is no time to wait. Vienna has days, perhaps hours. Better numbers will not arrive because Europe has sent everything it will send. This ragged coalition of ancient enemies and theological rivals is all that stands between the Ottoman Empire and total conquest. Faith becomes the bridge where politics failed. These men believe, truly believe, that God has brought them to this moment for a purpose, that Providence has assembled this army against all logic because heaven itself demands Vienna be saved. They pray together, Catholics and Protestants kneeling side by side, asking for strength beyond human capacity. Survival creates bonds stronger than any treaty. Each man knows that if Vienna falls, his own city, his own family, his own kingdom will be next. They fight not for Austria, not for the Habsburgs, not for political advantage. They fight because they are all that stands between civilization and darkness. Sobieski addresses the assembled commanders. His voice carries the weight of absolute conviction. They will march on Vienna. They will engage 80,000 Ottomans with their 27,000. The numbers are madness. The odds are impossible. They march anyway, because some battles must be fought regardless of the cost, because good men do not abandon the dying when rescue is still possible, no matter how remote. The coalition rides south toward Vienna, toward glory or annihilation, toward history. August bleeds into September and Vienna's death accelerates. The walls crumble faster than exhausted defenders can repair them. Each day brings new breaches, new gaps in defenses that have protected the city for centuries. The Ottoman cannons never stop. Day and night they roar, grinding ancient stone into dust and rubble. Count Starhemberg walks the ramparts and counts what remains. The powder stores are nearly empty. Soon they will have nothing to fire back with, nothing to slow the Ottoman advance. The mines are the greater terror. Ottoman sappers have dug so deep beneath the walls that the ground trembles underfoot. Any day now, any hour, they will light the fuses and entire sections of the defences will vanish in fire and smoke. The garrison has been reduced to 4,000 fighting men. All of them are half dead from hunger, their uniforms hanging loose on frames that have shed 30 pounds or more. They can barely lift their muskets. Some collapse at their posts from sheer exhaustion and never rise again. These are not soldiers anymore. They are ghosts in uniform, held together by nothing but stubborn refusal to die. On September 9th, Starhemberg sends his last messenger through the Ottoman lines under cover of darkness. The message is brutally simple. Come now, or do not come at all. We have days, perhaps hours. It is not a plea, it is a statement of fact. Vienna is dying. The end is coming whether help arrives or not. But if there is to be any hope of survival, it must come now. Not tomorrow, not next week. Now. September 10th dawns grey and hopeless. Then, just before dusk, a rumour spreads through the city like wildfire. A sentry on the northern wall swears he saw signal fires on the distant mountains. Another claims to have heard the faint echo of trumpets carried on the wind. Most dismiss it as fever dreams, the hallucinations of starving minds desperate for hope. But some believe. Some gather on the walls as darkness falls, straining their eyes toward the north, toward the mountains that have become their last fading hope. Dawn breaks on September 11th, and the impossible becomes real. Banners appear on the summit of Kahlenberg. Not a few, not dozens, thousands of them, cresting the ridge like a second sunrise. The double-headed eagle of the Holy Roman Empire, the white eagle of Poland against crimson fields, the standards of Bavaria, Saxony, Franconia, and a dozen other German principalities. The relief army has arrived. Church bells ring in Vienna for the first time in weeks. The sound cascades through the city, bronze voices crying out joy and defiance. People stumble into the streets, weeping openly, embracing strangers, falling to their knees in prayer. They do not know if this small force can save them. They do not know if rescue is truly possible. But for the first time in 2 months of hell, they believe they might not die alone. A whisper spreads through every street, every home, every broken heart in Vienna. It passes from soldier to civilian, from mother to child, from the dying to those who still cling to life. A whisper that becomes a murmur, then a chant, then a roar of hope reclaimed from the jaws of despair. The Polish king is coming. Jan Sobieski stands on Kahlenberg's summit, looking down at the Ottoman host spread below like a dark sea. Behind him, 27,000 men prepare for the impossible. Ahead lies Vienna, dying, but not yet dead. He raises his hand. The army begins its descent. The night of September 11th settles over the Vienna woods like a held breath. The relief army makes camp among the trees in absolute silence. No fires are lit, no songs are sung. Even conversation drops to whispers that barely disturb the darkness. They are close enough to the Ottoman lines that a single flame, a single shout, could reveal their position and rob them of the element of surprise. Men check their weapons in silence. Cavalry inspect their horses' hooves, tighten girths, test the balance of lance and sabre. Infantry clean their muskets by feel alone. Prayers are whispered into the darkness, to the Virgin Mary, to Christ, to saints whose names have protected warriors for centuries. The forest breathes with the sound of 27,000 men preparing to face death. Sleep comes fitfully if it comes at all. Most simply lie awake, staring up at stars visible through gaps in the canopy, wondering if they will see another sunset. Dawn breaks on September 12th, and the commanders climb to the summit of Kahlenberg to survey the battlefield. What they see steals the breath from their lungs. Below them, spread across the landscape like a living carpet, lies the Ottoman army. 80,000 men in perfect formation stretching for miles in every direction. The formations are textbook, cavalry positioned for rapid deployment, infantry in defensive squares, artillery parks bristling with bronze cannons that could reduce mountains to rubble. Cavalry reserves number in the tens of thousands, fresh troops waiting to exploit any weakness, to turn breakthrough into rout. The crescent banners are so numerous they look like a second sky, green silk rippling in the morning breeze. Supply wagons form their own city. Command tents sprawl across acres of ground. This is not just an army. This is the concentrated military might of an empire that has conquered half the known world. The mathematics are impossible. 27,000 against 80,000. Attackers against entrenched defenders. Exhausted men against rested troops. Every calculation screams suicide. King Jan Sobieski stands at the summit, his weathered face calm as stone. He surveys the Ottoman host with eyes that have seen too many battlefields to be frightened by numbers. He turns to his assembled commanders, Polish hetmans, Austrian generals, German princes, and his voice carries the weight of absolute certainty. Gentlemen, we will attack at noon. The Hussars will lead. Make your peace with God. No debate, no discussion of alternatives, no contingency plans if things go wrong. Just a simple statement of what will be, spoken with the conviction of a man who believes Providence has brought them to this exact moment for this exact purpose. The commanders return to their units and the word spreads. Noon. The Hussars will lead. Make peace with God. Across the Allied lines, Catholic priests move among the troops, offering blessings and final sacraments. They anoint foreheads with holy oil and whisper absolutions. Protestant chaplains lead hymns in Low German and Dutch, voices rising toward heaven with ancient songs of faith and deliverance. For one morning, the divide between Protestant and Catholic ceases to exist. The theological arguments that have torn Europe apart for generations fade into insignificance. There are no heretics here, no enemies within the ranks, only Christians facing darkness, only men who believe in something greater than themselves, preparing to pay whatever price virtue demands. The sun climbs toward its zenith, armor is donned, final prayers are offered, lances are tested, sabers are loosened in scabbards. Somewhere in the distance, Vienna's church bells ring again, a sound of desperate hope carried on the wind. The thunder is about to begin. At 1100 hours, the Allied army begins its descent from Kahlenberg. The infantry moves first, flowing down the slopes in disciplined formations, muskets at the ready. They engage the Ottoman skirmishers positioned on the lower hills, and the crack of gunfire echoes across the valley. Smoke begins to rise as the two forces collide. The German cavalry sweeps wide, hammering at the Ottoman flanks with disciplined charges. They drive into the enemy lines again and again, trying to create chaos, to force the Ottomans to commit their reserves too early. Steel rings against steel. Men scream. Horses fall. The battle unfolds according to plan, methodical and grinding, but it is too slow. The progress is measured in yards when it needs to be measured in miles. The Ottoman formations absorb each attack and reform. Their discipline holds. Their numbers are simply too great. The Allied infantry and cavalry are doing everything right, executing their tactics perfectly, and it is not enough. Vienna cannot wait for slow victories. Inside the city, Starhemberg makes his final gamble. He orders the gates thrown open and launches every man who can still hold a weapon in one desperate sortie. The emaciated defenders pour out like avenging ghosts, throwing themselves against the siege lines with the fury of men who have nothing left to lose. They buy minutes, perhaps an hour, but the clock is still running down. At noon, King Jan Sobieski sits atop his warhorse at the crest of a low ridge overlooking the battlefield. He can see everything from here, the struggling infantry below, the cavalry charges losing momentum, the vast Ottoman army that seems to swallow every attack like an ocean absorbing stones. Behind him, 3,000 winged hussars form into a massive wedge. The formation is perfect, a spear point of humanity and horseflesh designed for one purpose, to shatter whatever stands before it. These are the finest warriors Poland has ever produced, assembled in the greatest cavalry formation Europe has ever witnessed. The wings rise from their backs, eagle feathers catching the wind, creating shadows that dance across the ground. Each hussar sits in his saddle, with the stillness of a man who has made peace with death and found it acceptable. Sobieski's sons ride beside him, Alexander on his right, James on his left. Their young faces are set with grim determination. They are princes who could command from the rear, but they have chosen to charge with their father into the teeth of hell. Some legacies are written in blood and courage. 3,000 lances lower as one. The movement is synchronized, practiced through countless drills, perfected into an art form. 18-foot shafts of hollow wood, light enough to couch under one arm, strong enough to punch through armor and flesh and bone. Each lance point catches the sunlight and gleams like captured starfire. King Sobieski raises his saber high above his head. The blade flashes in the noon sun, visible to every man behind him. For a moment, time seems to stop. The entire battlefield holds its breath. Then the saber falls. The thunder begins. 3,000 winged hussars launch forward as one living organism. They start at a trot, hooves drumming against earth in perfect rhythm. The sound builds, the ground begins to shake, the formation accelerates to a canter, then faster, the rhythm intensifying, the distance between them and the Ottoman lines shrinking with every heartbeat. The wings catch the wind and begin to sing, a rising, whistling roar that grows louder with every second. It sounds like 1,000 eagles diving from heaven. It sounds like the end of the world approaching at the speed of fury. The largest cavalry charge in human history descends like the wrath of God made manifest. 3,000 Polish hussars launch like a hammer thrown by the hand of God himself. The trot becomes a canter, the rhythm building, hooves pounding the earth in perfect synchronization. Then the canter explodes into full gallop and the ground begins to shake as though the world itself trembles before what is coming. The eagle-feathered wings catch the wind and roar. The sound is unlike anything the Ottoman army has ever heard, like 1,000 eagles diving at once, like thunder given voice, like the fury of heaven descending. It grows louder with every second, drowning out the screams and gunfire, filling the air with a sound that freezes blood and breaks spirits. Behind the hussars, 18,000 allied cavalry follow in their wake. Germans, Austrians, Poles, every horseman the coalition can field charges down the slopes. But it is the winged hussars who lead. It is the hussars the enemy sees first, that apocalyptic wedge of steel and fury bearing down on them like judgment itself. The Ottoman Sipahi cavalry moves to intercept. These are the finest horsemen of the East, elite warriors who have won 100 campaigns from Baghdad to Belgrade. They have never known defeat. They form ranks with practiced precision and prepare to meet the charge. They last 4 minutes. The impact is audible from Vienna's walls, a thunderclap of steel on steel that echoes across the battlefield. 18-foot lances strike the Ottoman line with the force of a collapsing mountain. The first rank disintegrates, bodies fly from saddles, horses scream and fall. The Polish wedge punches through without slowing, second rank, third rank. The hussars ride through them like a scythe through wheat. Lances shatter against armour and bone, and the moment they break, each hussar discards the useless shaft, draws his sabre, and keeps riding, keeps killing. The wedge does not stop, cannot stop, will not stop. Behind them, the Allied cavalry widens the breach, pouring through the gap the hussars have torn in the Ottoman formations. The enemy line cracks, then it shatters completely. Panic spreads faster than any blade. Ottoman units that have never retreated break and run. The legendary Janissaries, elite shock troops who have terrorized Europe for generations, turn their backs and flee before the winged onslaught. What was the most disciplined army on earth becomes a mob of terrified men scrambling to escape. Kara Mustafa watches from his silk pavilion as his army disintegrates before his eyes. The man who promised the Sultan all of Europe stands frozen as the nightmare unfolds. Then, when the hussars become visible in the distance, their wings still singing that terrible song, he runs. He abandons his treasure, his maps, his golden pavilion, the golden apple meant for the Sultan's hand, all of it left behind in mad flight. By nightfall, 80,000 Ottoman soldiers are scattered to the winds. 15,000 lie dead on the field. The rest flee south in complete chaos, abandoning weapons, supplies, everything that might slow their escape. The greatest army the Sultan has ever assembled has been destroyed in a single afternoon by a force 1/3 its size. As the sun sets, King Jan Sobieski rides through the gates of Vienna. The streets are lined with people, hollow-eyed, skeletal, barely able to stand, yet they weep with joy. They reach out to touch his horse. They fall to their knees. Children press flowers into the hands of passing soldiers. Women kiss the hooves of the hussar mounts. Sobieski dismounts at St. Stephen's Cathedral, his armour covered in dust and blood and the residue of battle. He is 60 years old and has just fought the hardest fight of his life. He kneels before the altar, and in the silence that follows the thunder, he speaks the words that will echo through history. Veni, vidi, Deus vicit. I came, I saw, God conquered, not I conquered, not Poland conquered, not the hussars or the coalition or human strength conquered, God conquered. Because Sobieski understands what some men forget in the fever of victory, that courage is a gift from heaven, that strength is borrowed from sources beyond flesh, that when the impossible becomes possible, it is not by human hands alone. The siege is broken. The Ottoman advance is finished forever. Never again will the crescent banners threaten the heart of Europe. The tide of history, which seemed unstoppable just days before, has turned on one September afternoon. The thunder of wings rolled across history that day, proof that courage, faith, and unity can change the world. Against all reason, against all odds, Europe stood, because 3,000 knights rode into legend and carried civilization on their backs.